You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning. The news behind the headlines.
Is there a deep state? I'm sure you all witnessed yesterday the debacle called the Democrats, Gerald Nadler, and the Judiciary Committee an attempt to extract information from former presidential candidate, Chairman Corey Lewandowski, as they launched the very first day of their impeachment hearings against Tribulation Trump. And it turned into a food fight at the very best thing to say about it. And it was certainly something that I would think that most people in America would have been very disappointed at. Surely, those from each one of the various sides would probably say they won or they lost, or that Corey Lewandowski was able to deflect and to defend. Even Tribulation Trump himself tweeted out a tweet in the early stages of that hearing on yesterday, congratulating Corey Lewandowski on what he says. You know, Trump talks like a girl, beautiful language, gorgeous, beautiful. He talks like a little fairy. But at any rate, you witnessed that on yesterday, and it went on for several hours. But I want to ask you a question with respect to that. If you witnessed that, I'm sure most people did get a chance to see some of it, or you've heard about it in some of the aftermath news reporting that has taken place. Is there a deep state? Is there really a deep state? Some leftover members of the Obama administration or the Clinton administration or the Bush administration that and they're in the halls of the various administrative buildings in Washington, D.C., and they're in power, whether it's the CIA or the FBI or whether it's someone in Congress or someone in the IRS and that they all have what's one purpose: to defeat Tribulation Trump. That they are all united under the purpose of disqualifying him, overturning what they call a legal election and a duly elected president, as what those who are proponents of the deep state, or at least those who are saying there is a deep state. But is there a deep state? And if so, I would have a couple of questions. My question is, then the deep state must have just gotten started on the day that Tribulation Trump was illegally elected. Because if the deep state was there prior to the election of Tribulation Trump, then obviously the deep state would have stopped Tribulation Trump's election. So if there is, now I don't believe that there is a deep state. Do I believe that there are people within our government who are longtime governmental employees or congressperson or senators or representatives or local legislators and governors across America, the length and breadth of our political scheme, even in our media, that have political views? Absolutely. And in many ways, all those political views are opposing. Well, actually, that's what our Constitution calls for. It calls for various political beliefs. But I'm here today to announce that hell has come to America and justice has come home to Roost. And I want to give you if you will, a Hamite's perspective of what I see going on in America right now. But before I give you the Hamite perspective of what I see in terms of hell has come to America and that justice has come home to Roost, or hell has come home to Roost, I think in America is probably the best way to say this, that hell has come home to Roost in America. I want to express this, that going forward, we need to understand from that Tribulation Trump does not respect poor people. He does not respect women. He does not respect the rule of law. And he certainly will not respect the outcome of the 2020 election. He's not going to do that. And then the other item I would want to be clear about, if we can be clear about anything, is that if there is not a deep state, then is this deep state just that's being promoted by the supporters of Tribulation Trump as just a fake political party? But the Constitution does give us an opportunity to do that. to be at opposing views in terms of our political and philosophical and even social, cultural, and religious views. No man's religion or cultural belief, social belief should be impugned by the beliefs of some other. But let me give you a Hamite's perspective of what we see now with the contempt that, and by the way, you know, if there is a deep state, and if there is the Democrats, the liberals, you know, the Nancy Pelosi's, whether or not they are indeed in cahoots with trying to overthrow Tribulation Trump's presidency, if they are indeed in cahoots with trying to do that, is the appropriate response to the deep state to then trash and violate the Constitution and the rule of law, which is what we saw happening yesterday with Corey Lewandowski, but we also see now as a blanket covering where Tribulation Trump had just said that nobody has to testify before the congressional, a third and the first constitutional branch of government is not the executive branch, the presidential or the judicial branch. The first branch of the government, according to the Constitution, is the Congress. But what Tribulation Trump has now done by bringing in people like Bill Barr and then bringing in the rednecks, a part of his base, and threatening every other Republican of being challenged or thrown to the wolves, is that now he's now stood up and declared that nobody has to answer to anything from Congress. Congress can request tax returns, you ain't gonna get them. Congress can request Don McGahn to testify, you're not gonna have it. He can request Rob Porter to testify, it ain't gonna happen. And they're just stonewalling, and they're refusing to honor Congress' role in our triune government. My question, however, is this, is if there is a deep state, if there is someone trying to overthrow Trump, is the act of contempt for the Constitution the remedy? Because what we see happening now with Trump, Bill Barr, Mitch McConnell, the Republicans up and down the river stream, is contempt for Congress, contempt for the Constitution. In other words, I'm asking, and what I'm trying to get a response from is that, a response to rather, okay, if there's a wrong going on in the Democrats and they are vicious liars, baby-eating, blood-sucking, whoever it is that the rednecks say that Hillary and all her crowd is trashing the Constitution, not honoring the Constitution, denying the Constitution and the rights and privileges and rule of law of the Congress, the best way to deal with the baby-eating, blood-sucking, cultish people of Hillary Clinton's deep state? Is that the best response? And you can answer whatever you want to answer. While you're thinking about that, I want to give you a homeboy, give you a Hamite, Canaanite perspective of what we see happening, going all the way back to the Robert Mueller report, and even prior to that, going back to the request for Tribulation Trump's tax returns, going back to Michael Cohen testifying about his illegal dealings, wheeling and dealing, going back to the $130,000 payout to Stormy Daniels, going back to all of the other chicanery and tricks and the emolument of the Trump profiting from Trump hotels, and going back to the crowd size that Trump says is larger than any crowd size, going back to stating that Obama had wiretapped his building, going back to the accusations made by him by so many women that he's a sexual predator, going back to the fact that his very wife filed charges against him that he attempted to rape her or that he raped her, going back to the fact that Michael Cohen has stated that Tribulation Trump instructed him to make the payoff and do it in such a way that was hiding from the campaign finance committee. I mean, going back to all the various things that Trump has done, lying about having a deal with Kim Jong-un, embracing Kim Jong-un, and standing up there like a little girl talking about he's fallen in love with Kim Jong-un, that he and Kim Jong-un are in love. Going back to the fact that he will never has said a word against Vladimir Putin or Russia, and standing at the Helsinki meeting saying that though the Intelligence Committee, the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, who stated that Russia did meddle in the election. Trump stands up at Helsinki on the left side right side of Vladimir Putin and says, rather than believing our intelligence agencies, he says he believes Vladimir Putin over our 17 intelligence agency. I mean, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. It didn't just get started with the fact that Trump has said nobody will give any information, whether they work for the White House or whether they're just friends and had dinner. Nobody will give any information to the first constitutionally organized structure of our government called the Congress, that the Congress is non-existent, that they have no power to ask Trump or anybody that knows Trump any questions about anything. What that does is it's an outright outlawing of the Constitution. Is that going to serve Trump and the rednecks and the scared white men in their best interest? Is it going to serve, Jefferson Davis and the people of the Civil War, they decided rather than violate the Constitution, they pulled out of the Union and formed the Confederacy. They formed their own union. I mean, at least they had the decency to respect the Union states, that the federal government was a union. And so they said, well, we'll withdraw from the Union. And they formed what was known as the Confederacy, a group of states in conference or in confederation that opposed the Union states. And Jefferson Davis was this president, and Abraham Lincoln was the president of the Union states. But this crowd that is following Trump, of all the things I've said and 1,000 things more that I just don't have time here today to outline that he has done, where he's trampled on the justice, calling the media the enemy of the state, the things that he has done with locking up children and babies at the border, lying about building a wall and saying Mexico is going to pay for it, and then grafting money from the military and schools to be built for children in Fort Benning, Georgia, to be able to build a wall to stop Mexicans. That is the best method to deal with this, is what Trump is doing, which is trashing the Constitution. He's the only government. He's not only a king and a monarchy, but he's almost made himself God. At least in a parliamentary or a monarchy, the king has some squires that come along and are able to, and some jesters and a court. But Trump has made himself God. And people like Corey Lewandowski and Bill Barr are worshipers of this God, and they are proud to do it. Is this the, let's say, for instance, that Hillary is a baby eater, that she sucks baby's blood. Let's say that the Democrats and liberals are as awful as and they're trying to take down Trump's legal election. It wasn't a legal election, but let's say that they're trying to do it. Is the best way to fight them trashing the Constitution, which takes away all rights from everybody, even the rednecks that are following Trump and those that are worshiping him, not only from the babies from the Hillary who sucks baby's blood, at least that's what they say. That's what's out on the internet, that Hillary and her crowd they all suck baby's blood. Is the best way to deal with this is to deny all of Americans the efficacy of the Constitution and just say nobody. Trump has uber power, ultimate power, and ain't nobody gonna tell Congress or nobody else anything that Trump doesn't want it told. Trump is his own spokesperson. He knows more than the generals. He don't need a national security advisor. He makes all the decisions. He don't need a Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. He makes all the decisions. He does everything himself. He's the smartest man he's the smartest genius you ever want to see. Is that the way? So having said that, let me tell you what some people are watching, that for many, many years in this country, 400 years now, Hamite and Canaanite people have long since understood that the justice was not just for us, a justice for us. And in many ways, and in court decisions across the length and breadth of the constitutional establishment of America, and prior to that, that there are people who have not been privileged to the constitutional justice. And even with the advent of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, giving equal justice under the law for everybody, even that, for black and brown people, still is a stretch. You walk into a courtroom and you're a black man, you don't expect justice. You don't. And most likely you're not gonna get it. You're gonna get a watered down version of something. You're gonna get something that keeps the judge in his job, but you're not gonna get justice. And black and brown people know that. And with the voting rights side of acts of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, you look at some of the gerrymandering that goes on down there in my home state of North Carolina, and you realize these people are liars and thieves. They draw a district that looks like a snake because they want to avoid having anybody black in their district, called gerrymandering. So you can't even, your congressman doesn't represent you. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.